You are listening to the HP Outdoors Waterfowl Podcast, episode 15. In this episode of the HP Outdoors Waterfowl Podcast, we continue our duck profile segment and feature the Gadwall. And we're also going to be joined by Al Falkenstein of Big Al's Silhouette Decoys to talk about how to appropriately hunt over silhouette decoys. All right, we would like to welcome you to the 15th episode of the HP Outdoors Waterfowl Podcast. Joining me on this episode, as always, is my co-host Dan Harushka. Dan, how are you, sir?
Doing very well. How about yourself?
I'm doing well. Really excited about the show that we have this week. I think it's just one that's got a ton of information packed into it, and is a lot of really great things that we need to mention to a lot of our listeners for safety, and some things that are going on kind of in the waterfowl world right now. So we're going to touch on all of that. We're going to continue the duck profile segment, and we're going to feature the Gadwall this week. And you and I have certainly been on at least one really good Gadwall hunt in our time together. So we'll probably talk about that a little more down the road. And we're going to be joined by Al Falkenstein of Big Al's Silhouette style decoys. And we really wanted to have him on the show because there's a lot of sort of misinformation and a lot of kind of stigma out there about, two-dimensional silhouette decoys. So we're really excited to have him on the show and sort of address some of those concerns, with us. And, I think, it's a conversation that a lot of people will take a lot away from. So really looking forward to all of that. I know you had the annual holiday of the Pennsylvania deer season opener up there in Pennsylvania, and a couple nice bucks were taken up there off of the Harushka Ranch.
Yeah, the commencement of the Orange Army, like every year, 750,000 people in Pennsylvania here, and my nephew scored another big one again, which is about a 125-inch 8-point, which it's a decent 8-point. And I wouldn't have passed it, that's for sure. And also my brother-in-law, he shot his first buck, so his first buck ever. So that was pretty enjoyable, and I know my wife really enjoyed seeing him be successful with that. So yeah, it was a good time, and unfortunately I was getting over some kind of stomach bug, and I only stayed out till about 9 a.m. and then heard all the shooting from inside the house. So it is what it is, and I'm just glad to be back out waterfowl hunting. So deer season's still in, but that's not where my mind is right now.
That's never where my mind is anymore. But we're in our second split here before we get into the long third split of the season here in Virginia. So we got a little downtime for us, here. So gives us a good chance to kind of spend some more time, covering some things here with the show. And, we wanted to kind of touch on something before we get into this week's show. For all of the new listeners to our podcast, we've really kind of picked up a lot of new folks as the weeks have gone on, and as we've, been doing this a little bit longer. So, for those of you who, maybe just tuning in for the first time, or you maybe heard one or two episodes in the past, Dan and I really try to take time to, create a show here that focuses on all things waterfowl and waterfowl hunting. So it's, it's tips, it's techniques, it's interviews with folks, throughout the waterfowl industry. We do our best to keep you up to date on, conservation efforts and things like that are going on, throughout the waterfowl community. So, it's a show that is really driven by feedback of our listeners, and this is what you'd like us to cover and that kind of stuff. So for anyone out there that might be just listening to the show for the first time, if you want to get involved and kind of interact with us, you can reach us a multitude of different ways. Obviously, the best is our website, hpoutdoors.com. You can go on there and you can listen to all the episodes. You can reach us through our contact form on the website, or directly via email at info@hpoutdoors.com. You can always reach out to us on Facebook at HP Outdoors or Twitter as well. And you can always call us at the HP Outdoors listener hotline at 724-609-FOWL. That's 724-609-3695. So if you want to reach us, please feel free to do that, across any of those channels. And you can also check us out on iTunes. We've got all of our past episodes there. We've got a lot of really positive, great feedback on there. So I really appreciate all. I believe there was 22 5-star ratings on there the last time I checked. So we absolutely appreciate each and every one of you for taking the time to do that. So a lot of things to cover this week, Dan. So let's go ahead and, without further ado, go ahead and just kind of get into it here. First thing I wanted to announce to our listeners, and to anyone that's been listening to the show knows that this is new, and for all of you that are new to the show, we are now going to be doing a newsletter through HP Outdoors, and really the newsletter is going to be an opportunity for you all to just kind of keep up with us as far as what we've got going on. We're going to preview some of the future guests and things that we're going to cover on the show, maybe rehash some of the older stuff if it's appropriate at the time, and just sort of keep you up to date as far as what's going on with HP Outdoors. And, if there's any kind of pertinent information that we feel that y'all would appreciate, we'll certainly pass that along. But, it's not something that's going to be designed to fill up your inbox and be sort of like a spam type thing for you. It's, we're really going to try to provide you with useful content that, will help you engage with the show a little bit better. So if you, would like to become involved with that, you can go right on our website there on the podcast page and complete the newsletter. All you got to do is submit your email, and that's all. Or you can also do it through our Facebook page. There's a tab on the left-hand side for the newsletter that, allows you to put your information there, and you'll start receiving those emails from us when we periodically send those out. And, I know, Dan, I sent you an email this week through that system, kind of testing it out and stuff. And, I think you'll probably agree that it's going to be a really cool, way to just sort of another way for us to kind of engage with all of the listeners, that tune into the podcast.
Yeah. And, I subscribe to a couple other newsletters, and it's just nice to see the content. Like, you can listen to us on iTunes, but to go there and say you have a question about some clothing or dogs or something like that, well, you can go and actually go on there and see what we were talking about. All the links are there besides on our actual website, but it's getting shot out to you. So I think that's a huge benefit to listeners.
Yeah, and if you subscribe to the newsletter, be sure when you to add us to your contact book so that doesn't get caught up in your spam filters and that kind of stuff. If that's, is an issue for your mail service that you use. So, that's the first thing that we wanted to kind of roll out this week. And we hope, we've already got folks signing up, through the website and through our Facebook page, as we launched it this week. So, everyone, if you, would like to take a few minutes to do that, please feel free. And, kind of on to the discussion for this week. The first thing I thought that, when we talked about what we wanted to cover, some pretty substantial movement this week in the waterfowl conservation type arena. The Senate approved for the first time in a long time a raise to the federal duck stamp price. And, currently $15. They approved a raise to $25. Now is on to the president for signature into law. So before I offer my opinion on that, Dan, how do you feel about the Senate's action to raise that price?
Well, we did a full segment on this before, and I think it was 1991 was the last time they raised it.
Something like that. Yeah, it's been a while.
So, it's about time. I think, if with all the money actually going towards the program, which that doesn't happen with anything anymore these days, but the duck stamp does go back. What is it, like 98%, 98 cents on the dollar goes back. So it's about time, and hopefully we see the benefits of it.
Yeah, I think in general, all very positive move, but there's part of it for me that just feels, I think as waterfowlers in general, we sort of get targeted a little bit with fees and stuff. And here's what I mean by that. So in Virginia, for example, Interstate 95 is the main north and south freeway on the East Coast. And, east of 95 in our state, you have these blind laws in place, and they require, fees and, stamps that you have to pay for in certain times, and whether you have a boat. So if you have a boat, you have to have a floating blind license on that boat to hunt from it. If it has camouflage and a blind on it and that kind of thing. West of 95, you don't have to have that. So for me, it rubs me the wrong way when we get we get sort of fleeced in that regard, in my opinion. Federal stamps, state stamps, this, that, and the other. Again, if the money's going to go to where it's going to benefit conservation and the waterfowl hunter, 100% on board. But, some organizations don't push as strongly for hunters' rights and hunters' advocacies and hunters' access as others do. And again, the conservation piece is very important. But for me, the hunting access and the opportunities for new waterfowlers and youth and growth and expansion and that kind of stuff is equally as important. So, the duck stamp is one of those programs that is super beneficial. And I'm really glad that the price is being raised, because it's going to force everybody to put a little bit more into the pie. Quite frankly, it probably should be higher when you figure it, the last time it was raised and inflation and all that kind of jazz. But, the one thing that I always find ironic is everyone says should have been raised, in the past, and, I'd pay more than that and that kind of thing. And I'm guilty of saying the same thing, but, I haven't been buying 2 federal stamps, for the last several years, like, a lot of programs they try to do. So, I guess the moral of that story is, although it's a movement in the right direction, I would still encourage everyone to get involved in conservation and hunters, opportunities in whatever capacity you feel that you're able to, whether it be volunteering your time to build wood duck boxes, or, you go to your local DU chapter or your Delta Waterfowl chapter and you support them. There's always work that can be done. And this is just sort of a step in the right direction. But again, it doesn't take it's not real hard to find an advocacy group on the other side of the aisle that's trying to take away hunters' opportunities and hunters' rights and things like that. So no one's going to protect these rights for us. So, it's our responsibility to get out there and be involved. So I think this is a win all around, and I'm very happy to see more funding going into that program. So that's where I stand on this particular issue.
Well said. Well said.
Couple other public service announcements that I think we need to probably address this week. A lot of information going out about the heavy shot recall that was been announced a couple weeks ago. Basically, for those that are not familiar, it's they've been having problems with essentially the wad and the load, cracking and becoming faulty at below 0 temperatures, and basically the shot will still fire, but it will feel like it's got a low sort of impact and low push behind it. And what it is the wad gets caught in the barrel. So it's not the initial shot that is the danger. It's the follow-up shot could cause a blockage in your barrel and really be a really dangerous situation. So you can go on our Facebook page. We have posted that recall information on there. Essentially what you need to do is you need to check the lot number, which is stamped on the inside top flap of the box. And there's a series of lot numbers that have been affected by the recall. So if you find that a box of shells that you own, have purchased, falls within that line, you can contact Kelly Sorensen, who is the VP of Sales and Marketing for Heavy Shot. Her phone number is 541-367-3522, or you can email her at sales@heavyshot.com, and they will replace your shells at no charge to you. So they will issue you shipping to have it sent back to them and, replace the shells for you, which, I mean, you know what? Recalls happen all the time across all kinds of products. So I applaud them for putting the information out there, taking ownership of the oversight. They made the change virtually immediately when they realized the issue, and they're doing right. So clearly they're standing behind their product, and it's really a good thing to see, because it can obviously be a pretty dangerous situation. Dan and I, you and I have both purchased Heavy Shot this year, and we've been using it. So I was alarmed when I first saw it. And first thing I did is went and checked the lot number on our shells and kind of see where we were at. And fortunately enough, we weren't impacted by the recall.
Yeah. And like you said, they owned up to it, and to pay for shipping, and, just, it's better to be safe than sorry. Send it back, get a new box, and go on your way. They did the right thing. So, they're taking care of you there.
Yeah. And I mean, the way they've handled it, I've got no reason to not continue, to use their product and I have all the confidence in the company to stand behind what they're doing there. So, there's another recall, unfortunately, that we wanted to cover here this week. And, this one, is coming from Remington, the model 887 shotguns that were manufactured between 1 December 2013 and 24 November 2014. They are basically having a defect in the firing pin that can cause basically unintended discharge of the round when when the bolt is slid into the firing position, into the forward position. So obviously you should maintain good barrel control of your firearm and making sure it's pointed in a safe direction when loading. But essentially, with this firing pin situation, it could, when you slide that shell up, you close the receiver, it could actually cause a discharge. So, how you can go about finding out, if you're impacted by this is, you can go onto their recall website, which is 887recall.remington.com. You can enter the serial number on the firearm there, and it will tell you if you're impacted by this. Or you can call them at 1-800-243 9700. And the line is basically available from Monday through Friday, 9 to 5. Essentially, you will first hit prompt number 3, followed by prompt number 2. And what you'll need, if you're going to do it via telephone, is your name, your address, phone number, and the serial number of the weapon. All of these recall informations will be on the show notes for this episode. And, you can go right through our website and you can link up with all of these websites and stuff that you need to get squared away if you are impacted in any way by either of these recalls. So, Dan, recalls are never good because that means that there's faulty products on the market, but they're good in the sense that, these companies are going to take care of, those impacted by the situation.
Yeah, I didn't get time to read what the actual, the Remington recall was. And that could be a really, really dangerous situation there. You should never be pointing a barrel towards it. But if you're just loading a gun and not even thinking about it, if you're in close quarters, that could be really dangerous. So, if you do have one of those guns, please take a look at it and, send it back if need be.
Yep, without question. So, all good information there. And again, you can find all of that stuff at our website, www.hpoutdoors.com. On the podcast page, the show notes for episode 15 will have all of that. So let's go ahead and move on with the show, Dan, and continue our duck profile segment. And this week we've chosen to profile the Gadwall. And, the Gadwall is an interesting duck for me. It gets a kind of a bad rap sometimes from some folks, but, you and I have, with your brother Joe, a hunt that I can remember, and I'll just always remember because it was a straight up Gadwall hunt. I think we shot maybe 1 or 2 teal in that hunt, but we were just basically just pounding the Gadwalls that morning, and it was, hot and heavy for, the morning, and we had a nice shoot and, had a lot of good laughs that day. And, it's definitely one that just kind of resonates with me as far as one of my favorite hunts that we've been on.
Yeah, it's nice because, we're not known for huge duck populations. So when you get a chance to, act like you're down in Arkansas or something with just ducks piling in on top of you, like those are ones that you definitely remember being here in the Atlantic Flyway. So that was one of those hunts. And like you said, there were a lot of laughs, and it was, that's the reason we do this, the reason we hunt, and the reason we go out and, spend time with each other. So, definitely a great hunt. And, I know you shot a monster drake that day too.
Yeah, that's one of my most memorable harvests. That bird, worked and, was basically flying away from us. And, I just, leaned on the call, and boy, he banked and came right back in. And it was like, I could just tell, you and Joe, as soon as he turned onto the call, you guys just set your shotgun down, and it was like, all right, this one's yours, big boy. And, came in, pulled the shot off under pressure. Just everybody smiling, cutting up and stuff. So a lot of fun. That hunt also, your brother, shot the 2 with one shot. So we're, working a volley, and you and I are on different birds and stuff. And I just hear Joe out of the peripheral here, double, as we're hunting. And I believe you actually dropped the double in a previous episode here of the podcast, and people probably had no idea what that meant. So if you've heard that in the past, you now know what that means. It's from this Gadwall hunt that we had. So again, one that I look back on very, very favorably and really enjoyed. So, I think it's probably a good time to go ahead and just cover the Gadwall segment.
All right, and the Gadwall, you're coming in around 20 inches for both of them. The male's 21, female 19. The male's 2 pounds and the female's 1.8, so very similarly sized. And unfortunately, the Gadwall gets a bad rap for the lack of bright colors, but it is a very, very beautiful duck. And the male Gadwalls have they're grayish brown and a white belly with a black rump. In flight, they have a white speculum and chestnut, which I trim my beard so it's not as chestnut as it once was, and black portions on the wing. Black portions on the wing coverts are displayed, and slate gray bill, and the legs and feet are yellow. The female Gadwalls are similar to males. They have a mottled brown appearance, a yellowish bill with dark spots, and a smaller white speculum, and pretty similar to the mallard sound, but they're a little bit higher pitched. And as far as the breeding with the Gadwall, they are in near seasonal. They breed near seasonal and semi-permanent wetlands, short grass, tall grass, mixed prairie regions of the United States and Canada. And they actually begin breeding later than most ducks, which I did not know that. They will nest in fields and meadows, and they lay an average of 7 to 12 eggs.
The breeding thing is actually really interesting, and that's one of that's a good lead into when I talk about the population of the Gadwall, because being that they breed later in the season, they hatch a little bit later in the season. So that little bit later into the year allows a much better survival rate for their hatch than some of the other species that breed earlier. So that's part of the reason why the Gadwall has just really grown and exploded in population. Throughout the 70s and 80s, actually, the Gadwall really maintained kind of stable numbers, as many other species of ducks had declined due to reduced habitat opportunities and things like that. And now the Gadwall is essentially at record levels. The 2014 survey had the Gadwall counted at 3.8 million birds, which is basically 14% increase year over year. 2013, they were at 3.6 million. And it's basically 102% over the long-term average, for the Gadwall. So populations for them are just outstanding right now. And it's really a testament to habitat management and conservation programs that have been put in place that have not only helped all species for the most part across the board, but the Gadwall is one of those particulars that have really been thriving. As far as migration and wintering for the Gadwall, they basically winter, across 2/3 of the southern portion of the U.S. And, the greater populations are going to be in your central and Mississippi flyways. But they're, an interesting thing that I found is that they're often associated with widgeon and coots when they're, in their wintering grounds. And part of the reason for that is because the Gadwall is known to basically steal food from coots and other ducks. That they associate with. So they kind of just go around, robbing, from other ducks. And what better duck to do that when you've got, if you've seen a flock of coots, they're usually by the thousands out there. So you can got a lot of people, it's a target rich environment for them to go out there and pillage off the other ducks. But they pretty much
thieves.
Yeah, pretty much. They feed primarily on aquatic vegetation. But they're an interesting duck compared to most dabbling ducks, because they actually feed a little bit in a little bit deeper water. So they're typically found a little bit more offshore, which also might coincide with the whole coot association thing. So the Gadwall gets the kind of the bad rap, the gray duck, that kind of thing. But like I said, the Gadwall drake, in my opinion, is a pretty bird. I think it's absolutely a strong bird in its own right, for sure. So I'm going to pull the old question on you again, Dan. Let's see how close you get this time. Oldest known Gadwall harvested. Go.
22 years.
Just a bit outside. 19 years, 6 months is the oldest harvested.
Nice.
Gadwall was banded in Saskatchewan and harvested in Louisiana. So 19 years, 6 months. So it's a little long in the tooth. Made many a trips up and down the flyway that bird did. But so that does it. That's it. The Gadwall, great duck. Chances are, you've probably had a Gadwall or two, buzzing your spread somewhere up and down the flyway as, the population just continues to explode. So now we're going to get into something, Dan, that I personally think is a really, really good discussion that a lot of people should probably pay a little more attention to than what they do, and that's hunting silhouette decoys. A lot of negative, a lot of stigma around silhouette decoys, which, when we're joined by, Big Al's Decoys, we ask him those questions. I mean, we get right into the shine questions and the things that, people associate with hunting silhouette decoys. But, I think that there's a lot of good information that comes from this. And I think Al's spot on with a lot of the, question, a lot of the ways that he answers, some of our questions.
Yeah. I've hunted over silhouettes before. And I'm one of those guys that needs to be convinced with the confidence. Like I know people kill over them, and I needed to have this conversation with Al for sure.
Yeah. I think there's a lot of people like you. So, I think everyone's going to benefit from this interview, and it might make you think a little bit differently about silhouette decoys. So let's go ahead, and we're going to be joined on the show by Al Falkenstein of Big Al's Take 'em Style Silhouette Decoys. All right. We would like to welcome to the show a very special guest who's going to join us for a really great conversation that we're super excited to have. It's Al Falkenstein of Big Al's Decoys. Al, how are you today?
I'm doing great. How are you guys doing?
We're doing really well. We've been talking, amongst ourselves, Dan and I, about things that we wanted to cover on this show and just topics that we thought would be really beneficial for guys to hear. And one of the ones that we kept coming back to was, silhouette decoys and just sort of all of the, the mystery and the information out there about them. How effective are they? How do you use them? All of that kind of stuff. So, I started looking around on message forums, and every time I would find a thread about silhouettes, all I kept hearing about was Big Al's Take 'em Style Decoys. So I started looking into what you had going on and was super impressed. So I thought, you know what, let's go ahead and see if we can get him on the show. And you were gracious enough to join us here this evening for a few minutes. So we really appreciate that. And we're really looking forward to, talking about this issue with you and getting sort of the expert perspective on silhouette decoys. And, maybe probably one of the easiest ways to sort of start this conversation out would be, in your opinion, talk to us about some of the biggest misconceptions that people have about silhouette decoys, just sort of general, kind of bad information that's out there, that you hear or you see or you get people asking you questions about.
Sure. Well, it primarily starts out with the confidence level. They just feel that they don't or won't work, and you need a full body, style decoy and, to really get it done. But a lot of people don't remember the old days of goose hunting before layout blinds and full bodies. And, there were silhouettes. They were made out of plywood or whatever, someone could make them out of. And that's the way they killed geese. And, like I said, a lot of people just don't have that confidence level. And the new younger hunters see, the 3D type full bodies and shells and so forth, and everybody thinks that's what you have to have, but that's not true. I think if you just have confidence in your decoy or confidence in the silo as you're putting them out there, and that just takes a lot of pressure off of you. When you set your spread with the silhouettes. and to focus on other things like your hide or, what the atmosphere around you, whether it's your group or your dog or whatever. But just having the confidence, giving them an opportunity as in the silhouette to do their thing. If you can just get over that, and it just takes one or two times to get out there and get it done and watch birds finish in your silhouettes, and you're so happy. It's just like the greatest thing. So
I love having geese in my spread, no matter what the circumstance. So I definitely can understand what you're saying there, though, with the confidence builder for sure.
Yeah, and I was gonna say, confidence is more than half the battle when you're setting up. And one thing that no matter what you're hunting, especially in a field situation where you're going to use a silhouette, shine is a huge deal. So how do you deal with that when you're making your silhouettes?
Yeah, we put a matte overprint on them, and in that matte is like a fine mica grit, and that also helps reduce that shine. But I would also like to say in my opinion, there's two different types of appearances that would be, we'll call them skeptical, and one would be sheen and the other one would be shine. And, they're really two different things, because a live bird does have sheen to it. It might not shine like a reflective cellophane, but there is some sheen to that bird. And and a lot of decoys have somewhat of a sheen on them, and I feel that's acceptable in the market as well. I don't think everything has to be dirt matte, to finish birds with, but you definitely do not want to shine, that's for sure. We feel that we are at least at the sheen, if not minimal, as in to no sheen, very flat finish on our products. And again, we test for that, and we run them through a quality control after they're printed to make sure that they meet that dullness level. But, there's other types of decoys out there, whether they're full bodies or shells or whatever as well, that do even have some sheen on them. And again, like I said, there's a level of that I feel is acceptable in the marketplace on decoys, period. But, the other thing too is that, when you set we'll stay with the silhouettes up, but, a lot of people think that, what you see at ground level, whether it even is a sheen, that's the same thing that the birds can see from above, but it's proven that the angle that we see is not the same angle that the birds see up above. So the reflectiveness from the sunlight or whatever on what we see at ground level is not the same as what's from above.
Yeah, and I just thinking back to some hunts when there's been times where, we have honkers in the decoys, and you take a look at them, if it's raining or just got done raining, and like you said, there is a sheen to them, and sometimes it looks like they're, giving off more of a shine or a sheen than the actual decoys are. So, I think there definitely is some leeway in that. A lot of you can pick up a flocking kit pretty easy. What's your opinion on that? Do you flock any of your decoys, or is that something that you just don't need with the materials that you're currently using?
Well, I really think flocking looks great, and it knocks off. I can't say any potential sheen 100% because I've seen flocking brand new on the product have some sheen to it as well, and I'm like, why would somebody put that on there? Because it's got possibly even more sheen than the silhouette does initially. But I think once the flocking gets worked down a little bit and you hunt over them, it gets a little bit of dust on it and so forth, it does kind of kill that. But you can flock my product. I sell what I've come out with called a deadhead line, and that's where I've taken actually a 3D molded head and have incorporated that into my silhouettes that's fully positionable. It's flocked, and I filed for patent on that earlier this year. But along with that, since the heads were flocked and molded, I went ahead and flocked the tails on those as well, just to match the head. And then I've on the feeders, which are not with a dimensional head, they're still the 2D regular style silhouette. I have just flocked the heads and tails on the feeders to match the uprights, which do have the 3D head. So, it really looks great. It definitely adds to the depth of the silhouette and gives it maybe even a little bit more lifelike look. But is it needed? No. And the other thing is that flocking does hold some moisture or condensation or even snowfall, and that's a whole another thing that where your silhouettes being the two-dimensional. I've had a lot of guys say that thank goodness for having silos in the spread, because it snowed quite heavily, and we were out there brushing off the backs of the full bodies and the shells, and we just couldn't do it all the time, and we had to stay in the blind to kill birds, and the silos just worked great for us. They saved our hunt. So, again, but the flocking thing, you are going to get some moisture, frost, snow, we have blowing to stick on those areas. But we hunted with them in Alberta one time, and without the flocking, and we got caught in just about a blizzard, and it was an evening hunt. We left everything out, including the blinds, and went home and came back out in the spread in the morning. And we actually went around and just with our knuckles knocked off the snow that was on there and kind of caked on pretty hard on the silos, and it just fell right off. And we were hunting within, I'd say, 20 minutes, 25 minutes. We were in the blinds and good to go for our morning shoot. So, in a way, I was glad that they weren't flocked.
So, you mentioned the deadhead style decoys and the, just some really innovative stuff that you're incorporating into the silhouette decoy that, as you mentioned earlier, has just been around for, such a long time. When you read about silhouettes in these forums and things like that, a lot of people refer to them as, quote unquote, great filler filler decoys and, all that kind of stuff. But with the innovations that you're including and, just what we know about how geese see and how all of that works, is there any reason why someone can't hunt over just a flat out spread of silhouettes, or, do they really excel in the filler role, or can they be a standalone spread on their own?
I think that someone who's experienced with hunting with silhouettes, and again has that confidence level, they could do a full silo hunt with no problem. It's been done and being done all over the country. From Mexico, that I've got some customers, to up in Alberta, etc. And going with all silos definitely can be done. Late season birds, they're a little bit tougher. It does not insult me if someone uses my product as a filler whatsoever. I personally believe in having a little variety of decoys in the spread, in the late season. So, if you have some shells and full bodies and just a mixture, silos definitely can add numbers to the spread. But, for a person that wants to go all silo and give that a try, it definitely can be done. So it takes a little bit of, experience with setting the spread, with an all silo spread. But, once you've accomplished that, no problem. It can be done. Yep.
Yeah. My next question is actually dealing with, how to properly set up a spread, but, I think one of the best ways that silhouettes offer just a super unique opportunity for a hunter is the fact that you can actually stick them in the stubble straps of your blind. And, that can really be almost an ultimate, form of concealment to help you hide, because, when you've got those full body set between you and they're kind of looking shorter and stubbier because you've got this height of your blinds beside them, the silhouette offers a unique opportunity to really compensate for that and can kind of ride, shotgun right there on your blind. And, I just think that that's a really unique situation that a lot of guys overlook when they're, using silhouettes in the field and trying to figure out, what the best way to use them. So, that's something that I think that's great. But I'd like to know from you, is there any other tips that you, can offer our audience about how to set a proper spread? Some guys say, take 4 or 5 big steps in between, birds when you set them down, or, put them in a T shape and all that kind of stuff. And we'll talk a little bit more as we go as to why that's important. But, sort of generally speaking, what are some proper things that guys should be considering when they're setting up a silhouette type spread?
Sure. Definitely. Number one is distance. And, between the silhouettes, 5 to 6 feet is optimal between each silhouette. 45-degree angles. I like to set them up, start up, and just makes it easier for everyone is in a triangular, a 45 to the left, a 45 to the right, and then one behind it perpendicular, kind of creating a triangle. And then that way the birds can see that from any direction that they're coming from, and then build it from there, and then my next triangle, and so forth and so on, and that way I'm covered, and from any angle, a lot of birds as the season progresses, fellas can realize that, well, that's the roost, and that's the direction they're going to come from, and so forth and so on, but that's fine, and we're not going to put every silhouette facing that direction, and that's something you need to keep in mind, because once those birds see the silhouettes from some distance, they're going to commit, and they're going to start working the spread. But if those silhouettes, again, being two-dimensional, just kind of disappear as they circle around, then they're going to know something's up, and that's where that triangle type of setup comes into play. The other thing that I personally like to do is I like to set up 2 groups, a larger group upwind and a smaller subgroup downwind, and kind of let the birds pick to see which group they want to, or they feel comfortable in landing in. But I think more options is better than just one big group and containing one hole within that group for the birds to commit to. So I like to give them some options. It keeps them around longer, keeps them more interested in the spread too, because they're having a look at 2 different groups, so to say, rather than just one.
That's pretty interesting. So you started out saying the birds, obviously they have a different point of view as what we do on the ground, but explain a little bit of the movement, if you will, created by a 2D silhouette.
Sure. Yeah, that 45 to the left and a 45 to the right, we'll just say we'll call that head facing, 45 left and a 45 right. What that does is that as the birds move and turn and kind of work toward your spread, it was almost like a now you see them, now you don't type of effect. But in general, what I'm saying is that they're seeing at one point an entire bird or 3/4 of it, and then at the next point they're seeing a different bird, and they're seeing a majority of that, either 3/4 of it or 100% of that, based on the angles. That's what creates the movement, and so when that bird sees some of that one or none of that one, but all of a sudden I see another one here, a full side view. That's what creates the movement. And as they're flying and spinning and turning and working toward the spread, they're picking up on more, and they're seeing some that they didn't see before, etc. And that's all the movement or the conception of movement that they're seeing, and that's what makes it work.
Yeah, it's almost like a mind game, like looking through one of those tunnels with all the.
It is, and what I like to do too is if I do know of a roost, I'll put some of the silos on the outside of the spread facing the roost, for sure. But I mean maybe 8 dozen whole, but here and there. But you still want to get back to that 45 left, 45 right triangular type setup to play with their heads a little bit to give that simulation of movement, because ultimately, like I said, those side-facing ones that face the roost that brought those birds over to take a good look at you are now, obsolete, so to say, because they are, they did their job, but, now you need your spread to work for you.
Right. So let me ask you, just piggybacking off that, how much better is the triangle setup than someone that kind of just has, say a T or something like that? Obviously you hunt over them a lot. So have you seen a huge difference with using more of the triangle setup?
I like the triangle setup myself. I mean, that's what works for us very well. I mean, there are some different ways to still pull that off. The movement or the motion look, but a lot of birds tend to obviously are going to land into the wind, and based on that, into the wind, and again, a tail facing bird seems to want to decoy better than a head facing bird. In other words, you don't want the birds or the decoys facing backwards. The birds feel more comfortable landing toward the rear of the butt of a decoy, whether that's a silo or a full body or whatever. So I tend to lean more toward the 45. It's just a little bit easier to set up, and the other thing too, and it is kind of a misconception, and we talked about the distance here briefly, but between the silos of having like 5 or 6 feet, is that when you're scouting or looking at fields and you see birds and it's the late season and they look stacked, so to say, you want to replicate, or you try to replicate that hard feeding look in the field, but what you have to be careful in doing is, and with a silhouette it's very easy to do, is to put them too close, because you think, oh, it's just a two-dimensional thin silhouette. I can put them 2 feet apart and 3 feet apart and so forth and so on. And boy, that really looks good. They're in there stacked tight. It might look good to you or whatever, but the problem is that bird, that live bird, needs the room to land, and it treats every silhouette, even if it's just two-dimensional, like it's a live bird. So you almost have to think that you're putting out a full body, not a silhouette, because you still want to give those birds places to land. It's pretty interesting.
Yeah, I mean it makes total sense too. So, and you mentioned, when it gets cold and they're kind of huddled up, and you also mentioned hunting Alberta, so you obviously have dealt with frozen ground. That could be one of the biggest pain in the butts, is either putting stakes down or whatever it may be. So how do you deal with frozen ground or ice when you're hunting with those? What's an easy way to get those silos in the ground?
Well, because my silhouettes have a dual wire or an H wire system on them, I actually came up with that method to use them with. I think it locks them in place the best, and what one thing you really don't, a misconception of a silo or whatever, a potential, would be motion, and you really don't want to have any motion with a silhouette for a couple of reasons. One, you don't want to potentially have any flashing or any potential sheen or anything of that nature, which motion would enhance. But the other thing is that if you're going to take the time to put them in a 45 left and a 45 right and do all this and that, only to have the wind take them and turn them, all facing the wind or all different directions, that kind of takes away from the motion thing we just talked about and so forth. So that's why I have a dual and H wire on mine, because that kind of locks the front and back, so to say, and it makes them really sturdy in the ground. But getting back to the frozen ground, what I do is I trim up the back H-wire about level with the stem of the leg, and I run a portable drill for just one wire in the front, and we just zip holes with that. And now you're just doing one hole per silo, much like you would for a stake for a motion stake or something for a shell type goose decoy. So now you're just punching one hole, and there's been guys that have come up with a hole punch too, for my product. Some of them have come up with a double prong for the H wire. I've got the dimension, and came up with a punch with that for like a foot stomping punch. But I personally like the drill in the field, just to take an extra battery with you and just zip the holes that way. Really, if you can break through the first couple inches of ground, that's usually your first 3 inches are pretty rock solid. And once you break through that, even with the H wire, the ground, that wire permeates pretty easily at that point.
So you've talked a lot about, things that would be, really attractive to a hunter as far as, reasons to use silhouettes. Another reason that a lot of guys talk about wanting to use silhouettes is the price. Talk to us a little bit about how they compare price-wise to, full body decoys, and just, kind of show us the savings that stands to be made, by going with silhouettes versus a full body type product or shell or something like that.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, in general, depending on, which product you're looking at, I've seen them be anywhere from 1/3 to 1/2 of the cost, of a full body or shell type decoy. And I mean, it just depends. A lot of the full bodies now are, packed in 6-packs or sold that way. And based on that, we're, for 1 dozen silhouettes, we're probably 1/3 of the cost of that. So, it's definitely a cost savings factor for sure. It's very appealing to people on a budget, or to a lot of youth hunters as well, which I do have and sell a lot of my products to, high school and college students and so forth, and that are just starting hunting, and I'll give them some tips and whatnot, and and they're very happy with the product, and it works for people definitely that are on a budget as well. So it's not to be looked down upon as that, oh, you're hunting with silhouettes, that's a substandard decoy and whatnot. It's like I said, it's all in the mindset, and I've had adults call me, veteran hunters, and have ran silos and said that, they were competing against guys with full bodies that were, a field or two away, and they drew a lot of the birds to the silhouettes, possibly even more. So, I don't know how to say that, if it's, a dollar factor, or if it's more of a mindset. It still gets you from point A to B. It might not be a Mercedes, but it still does its job, and it is very affordable.
Yeah, and I've read a lot of guys. You talk about youth hunters and college kids and stuff that are budget minded. I've heard a lot of guys talking about getting rid of the full body spread and changing over to silhouettes because they're tired of hauling the bags, and maybe they're getting a little bit older and just don't have the energy, or they don't have access to the fields that they used to, where they can drive out there and drop the spread out of the trailer, that kind of thing. So those definitely are all benefits and appealing qualities of silhouettes. But for a guy that wants to run silhouettes for whatever reason it is, if it's one of the ones that we've already talked about or another one, how many would you recommend that a hunter needs at a minimum to really be able to effectively hunt over a silhouette spread, knowing the fact that, at any given point where the birds are circling, at least a portion of your decoy spread will not be visible to them potentially at any given time. So factoring that in, how many decoys would you say is a sort of a minimum, to kind of get you in the game, hunting over a silhouette spread?
Right. Yeah, I would say at least 3 dozen silhouettes would get you, decoying birds. I would have to say that would be about the minimum that I would use. And, everybody talks about, well, late season, you need big numbers and so forth and so on, the drawing power and so forth. But, I've seen that different as well. I've seen smaller setups do just as well. So, again, 3 dozen, 4 dozen, that would be about the minimal or the entry level, I would have to say, to really pull it off. And generally, that's about what fits into one silhouette bag, is close to 4 dozen silhouettes. So, could an individual take one silhouette bag full and, a layout blind or something and a shotgun and virtually do it all on their own? Yes. You could walk out into that field with your gun over your shoulder and, or some type of a layout blind. Maybe you need to make another trip, but, maybe or have your a friend carry the blinds or some guns or help out. But, with 2 guys, one bag of silhouettes, close to 4 dozen should definitely get you hunting. And, again, 4 dozen, 3 to 4 dozen, but, anything after that would also be great. 5 dozen, 6 dozen, was definitely not going to hurt. But you do not need 10 dozen, and I would recommend more than 1 or 2 dozen.
So that makes me think of 2 questions. The first one, how many silhouettes would you say would replace a dozen full body decoys?
In general, I'd say you probably want to double that. So 2 dozen silhouettes would definitely do the job, I would say, in replicating, a dozen full bodies. And would definitely get you, get the birds to look and have that feel what a dozen full bodies would do. Yeah,
and that makes total sense. So on to my next question, and it's kind of a 2-parter here. One, you say that it holds a bag would hold 4 dozen decoys. How much approximately does that weigh? Your product?
My product's actually a little bit lighter than some of the other silhouette products that are out there. Mine are made of a fluted chloroplast, which is about a 4 millimeter thickness. Actually, that's about 1/4 of an inch thick. And another company that I know of prints theirs on about a it's almost a 1/4 inch thick, but it's a solid material that's like a rigid vinyl. Now that weighs quite a bit more than my product, but I'd say you're probably looking at approximately 15 pounds for that, close to 4 dozen in the bag.
Yeah, so that's pretty easy to just throw on your shoulder and take out to the field with
It
you.
is. It definitely is. Yes.
And you were talking about, hunting Alberta and being in a snowstorm and whatnot. So how durable is your product? And, I think I know the answer to the question, but, can they really stand up to, a few years of abuse that a waterfowler, puts his gear through?
Right. Yes, they can. It's a fluted material. It replicates cardboard, we'll say, but it's all plastic. 100% plastic, 100% waterproof, snow-proof, whatever proof. It's going to handle that. But there's potential for a little bit of bending, but again, it's plastic. The material wants to almost go back in place, so there's no breaking to it at all. There's no breaking whatsoever. There's no bending it and it's going to snap. That will never happen. So there's no snap effect or total breakage. There could be a bend here and there, maybe on a beak, or maybe a part that's a little bit more exposed on the thinner side. But the way the flutes run as well, which are perpendicular to the piece up in or the vertical, helps in the stability factor, especially like in the neck areas and so forth. So the flutes run with the neck, not against the neck. In other words, it would be very, very difficult to break that neck straight back because the fluting of the material runs vertically, up and down with the neck. And that's how, we design that and so forth. But, waterfowlers, as you said, very tough on everything. I had this discussion with a friend of mine. Waterfowlers' gear, period, their guns, the boats, the this, the that, the decoys, the clothing, everything. I mean, it's just, we put it to the test, no doubt, with the weathers that we hunt in and so forth for waterfowl. And, from pushing 80-degree days to below zero, we're out there. But again, the product is doubtful, and I don't think anything lasts forever. But again, it's how an individual takes care of their product, of their gear. You're going to hunt with the product. You can hunt heavily with the product. You're going to put it away. It's going to hang somewhere for the entire summer, out in a garage or a shed or something like that. And you're going to, go at it again for 3 months. So, I would say, I have not said no one's come back to me and said they've totally fell apart or anything like that over the last 4 to 6 years that we've been making these products and selling them all over the country. So, and they're priced right. So it's not that, if something does happen, some damage, or they've been shot at. I mean, I've got boys that hunt with me that have, we've shot the product, picking up a cripple or something like that, and we still put them back out in the field. They've got holes in them and so forth. The little Swiss cheese look to the silhouette, but they're still out there doing their thing. So again, it's like I said, a lot of it has to do with how each individual takes care of their stuff, and some guys do a little better job with that than others, and if you do take care of it, it should last you for a while. And if you need some more to replace, a couple that did get damaged, you're not going to break the bank if you've got to buy, another dozen just to kind of refresh some of the ones that may have went through the mill, so to say.
Yeah, I had a question for you about the durability as well. So you've talked about, how rugged it is and that kind of stuff. A lot of the things you hear about when guys are talking full bodies and paint schemes and that kind of stuff, they want to see if it'll pass the fingernail test, and they're trying to scratch it and all that kind of stuff. With your product, is that something that a hunter has to be concerned about, with the actual print of the decoy becoming faded, or, if one of the, H stakes, brushes against the side of the decoy, could it potentially scratch it to where the print could come off or anything like that? Or is it pretty durable in that regard as well?
It's pretty durable in that regard. I've never had where you could actually scrape the paint right off. I've never had that problem. With long-term use, they can get abrasive. That tends to get like they can slightly scratch. They can, with that matte overprint, get kind of a little bit of a fog or cloud or wherever they become or had some abrasion on there. But, I've worked that out with my people in the factory that, we've looked in to see what we could do with that, or what we could at least recommend to those customers in the field that have had that issue, and after some usage, and want to try to keep them as looking as new as possible. But you can dust them with some matte varnish overspray, and that tends to make them pretty much pop back into new form. I kind of experimented with that myself at one time, as in I noticed some abrasion had occurred, and it looked like a little cloud, and I thought it was just dust or something, or mud, or field dust, and I went to wipe it off, and it wasn't coming off right away, so I wetted my finger, and I rubbed on it, and and it just disappeared. And then it reappeared after it dried, and I was like, well, that's odd. I thought I had wiped it off. Well, here it was, the abrasion, which created a little bit of a cloudiness or factor. And I went and I dusted it with some matte overspray, varnish, clear, and that gave it that moisture back. But then it created the barrier that it needed again, and it looked darn good. So, again, that's something you could touch up. And a lot of us have done that with other decoys, in the past. I've dusted some shells again that, the paint may have, I wouldn't say scratched off, but just over years of use and abrasion, dusted, put some paint color back on there. So, again, it's something that an individual can do to the product if they need to, and, kind of keep them lasting a little bit longer.
Yeah, it's good to know that there's a touch-up process that will work, because like you said, you hear a lot about guys who paint up a lot of their own decoys, specifically for diver spreads and that kind of stuff, where they can get away with them being a little more basic, and they'll put that that clear matte varnish on there as a kind of a sealer. So it's good to know that same kind of practice will work on a silhouette style decoy. We've talked a lot about benefits and, great features of silhouettes and how they can be used effectively in the field and that kind of thing. In your opinion, as someone who's, in the business and hunts over them a great deal, what are some of the drawbacks that a hunter can expect, when using silhouette decoys? Obviously, everything in hunting seems like it's a give and take. Some products may be, better than certain areas, but you're going to sacrifice in other areas. So in your opinion, what are some of the drawback areas for silhouettes?
Frankly, I don't think there are really any. I mean, from a cost standpoint, number one, the cost to replace the product is nominal compared to, replacing a full body or a shell type decoy. So, right off the bat, everyone's, we're all conscious of our, dollars and cents, and when a drawback, as far as cost goes, there wouldn't be anything. I would rather have silos than full bodies and have to replace full bodies for being shot in the field or abused or whatever down the road, and things that happen. But that's probably number one. The cost, and again, the silhouette, whether it's my product or even another brand of silhouette, it's a lot cheaper to replace a silhouette or silhouette spread than a full body spread, for sure. I don't. It from a base standpoint, that is to affix the decoy or the silhouette or the product in the field. The H wires, as I say, work very well in most cases. We've even, been able to push them straight down on the backs of the silhouettes. They're very durable. They can take a lot of downward pressure right onto the H wire, and bust through some somewhat frosted, frozen ground without using a punch.
Let me ask you about the H wire real quick. Is that wire permanently affixed to the decoy? So you're pushing down on the decoy to push the wire into the ground, or do they separate and you set the wire and then you put the decoy on the wire?
No, they come with wires, but once you insert that wire into my product, you'll never, you can take it out if you'd like. I have also got a step on that. In other words, one end is a little bit longer than the other, and a while back when I first came out with the goose decoys, I did that so that you could set that product in water, standing water, and still have a good majority of it out of the water. Or if you took it into the field, you could reverse that H wire, and it was a little bit shorter, and you could have a better field effect. Or maybe your field was high, and the grasses were high, and you'd like it to be a little bit taller. That was a really neat design on that H-wire cross, and one end being a little taller than the other, it kind of gave you a chance to, use that wire to your benefit as far as the setup or high or low. But I've come out with duck since, and a couple others, some lesser Canadas and some smaller geese, and so I've kind of scaled that wire down a little bit more, and I don't have as long as an end that I used to have, because I wanted to have a universal wire. I just didn't want to sell an H wire for the duck and an H wire for this size and an H wire for that, and it would not only for us to pack out or to to produce, but for the guy in the field that he's grabbed the wrong wires and so forth and so on. But the thing that I was getting at, though, is the frozen ground effect and so forth, and the drawback that you were talking about was, with the H wires, having to punch a hole or drill a hole versus, setting a decoy out that's on a round base, like a full body, or a shell or something of that nature. Anytime you have to put or punch something into the ground and frozen ground, that makes it a little bit more difficult. Is that a drawback? It's probably not a drawback. Is it a little bit more of an inconvenience? Yeah, it is to a degree. But again, what do you have? What do you have to run? In other words, if you're an all silhouette hunter, you're just going to deal with that. If you've spent thousands of dollars to have a full body spread, and you're going to have ring bases and so forth and so on, then that's what you could you get with that. So is that a drawback? Like I said, I don't think it is, but there's things that might be a little bit easier to set up in the field at times.
Yeah, I think that the drawback thing is sort of a loaded question, admittedly, because it really is a it's a perception and a perspective of every individual situation. The guy that has the the ability to drive into his fields and has a trailer full of full bodies,
right,
kind of touching on the confidence thing, he thinks that that's the best way to do it, and he's going to consider a silo, using a silo spread as a drawback because it may not be as realistic as his big full body spread, in his opinion. But for a guy who might be getting started or doing it on his own, the benefit of the cost and the ability to throw 4 dozen in a bag and throw it on his shoulder and head to the field, vastly outweighs the expense and the room and the ability to transport a 6 or 7 dozen Canada Goose spread. So it all really does boil down to everybody's individual situation and kind of the circumstances that they're dealing with. So I have to be honest with you. I think this conversation will probably enlighten a lot of people that had doubts about using silhouette decoys in the past. I think a lot of people, the reason why they lack the confidence in the silhouette is that they don't know how to they don't necessarily understand how the decoy works and how to appropriately deploy that spread into the field so that it does work the way it's designed. So I'm really glad that you mentioned, the triangle setting method. I think that's really important and key, if you're going to go the silhouette route, that you do it appropriately, because as well as I do, when you're hunting with buddies, especially if you're hunting silhouettes, that kind of thing, the first time a bird, a flock of decoys or a flock of birds want to flare, first thing that they want to do is blame the silhouette for shine or something like that. You hear that all over the place, and quite frankly, could that be the reason that they flared? Maybe. It could just as easily be the fact that you're not concealed well enough, or you don't have the spread deployed properly, or you don't have enough room for them to land. There's a billion other things that could have flared that flock of birds. But when you're hunting with something like silhouettes where, you read on the internet a lot about shine and stuff like that, that's the first thing that someone's going to mention when the birds flare, and then the confidence that you mentioned's gone. And that makes it just even more challenging to finish birds. So I'm really glad you hit on all of that stuff. And we really encourage everyone to check you out at bigowlsdecoys.com. You're also on Facebook, and you can get on there and check out some of the, success pictures that you guys have had in the field, and, guys sending you in, photos of having success in the field. So we really appreciate you giving us a few minutes here. And, I've enjoyed talking silhouette decoys with you. And I look forward to, seeing the rest of those success pictures that you guys post up, and wish you guys nothing but the best, and best of luck for the rest of the season.
Well, thank you. Yeah, it was my pleasure, and hopefully you guys will be hunting over some silhouettes soon, and hopefully answered some of those questions. Thanks for the opportunity, and you guys have a great season yourselves.
We certainly appreciate it. And again, for everybody that's interested in checking out Silhouette Decoys, you can check out Big Al's Decoys at bigowlsdecoys.com. Al, thanks again. Take care. Let's do it again soon.
All right. Have a good one. Thanks.
Well, I'd like to thank Al for joining us on the show and, taking the tough questions regarding Silhouette Decoys. And my question to you, Dan, is how quickly are you going to go out and buy a Silhouette spread?
I definitely think I'm going to be adding some here shortly. And what I like about talking to Al is just he's just brutally honest. Like, he'll tell you if you have any question, he's going to answer it for you, and he has some really good things going there, and like the Deadhead and a few other things coming out, and he's someone to keep an eye on for sure.
Yeah, and the thing about what I like about silhouettes, and particularly with what Al's got going on, is the silhouettes are a perfect way for a new waterfowler to get into the game. So whether you're hunting geese in fields or you're hunting, river sandbars where you're hoping to get some ducks in there, you can put silhouette decoys in all of those applications, and be effective. They're cost effective. And I think just the biggest challenge is getting over the fact that, when you turn on the TV, you're going to see guys hunting, 300 full body decoys, and you don't have to do that to be successful. Guys up here on the Maryland Eastern Shore have been killing birds for years over 2-dimensional decoys. And some of the just flat out killers of the industry still lean on those today as their primary decoy. So I think it serves two groups very, very well. One is the new waterfowler that doesn't have the budget to spend on a full body decoy spread. It also caters very well to those who are limited on space and can't necessarily carry that many decoys to the field or store them at their home. And then also, as you get a little bit older, or you just get, you spend a lot of time in the field, it just runs you down, loading and unloading and setting them all those up. Sometimes it's just nice to be able to set up a good, nice, light, packable spread. And, one of the things that I had never heard, and it was news to me, was the whole, setting them in triangles at the 45 angles makes complete sense to me. But, I had always heard about the T method. You set one perpendicular to the other so that no matter where the bird is circling, they always see part of a bird. But, I'm not, I'm going to employ or deploy the next time I'm out with silhouettes. I'm going to do, like I was talking about, and see if that works for me as well. So, all really good information. You can always check out, Al's products at bigowlsdecoys.com. He's also on Facebook. I know he's running some contests here for the end of the year. He's trying to get up to 5,000 likes on Facebook. So if you haven't done so, head on over to his page and give him a like, and you can get yourself entered into a giveaway that he's got going on here at the end of the year. So definitely check him out, and give it another thought about silhouettes if you haven't done that yet. So wow, Dan, I feel like we've covered a lot in this show. It's definitely been information packed, in my opinion.
Yeah, you've done a lot of talking today.
By all means, you're more than welcome to take the reins.
That's all right. Here. I'm sitting over here thinking about the when he was saying, 4 dozen silhouettes, you're talking 15, 20 pounds, and just thinking about some of the really just back in the back edge of the fields that you can't drive, and you don't want to, or you just can't carry all those full bodies. Like, what better way? Just throw 20 pounds on your shoulder and get up there like that. It's a game changer. It's something that you can add and just have another weapon for you.
Yeah, I think a lot of it is much like a lot of things in waterfowl hunting, that just because you haven't seen it done that way that much doesn't mean that it's not effective. So what I mean by that is you're not going to turn on the fouled life and see, a bunch of silhouettes. They're going to be hunting over 300-400 full body decoys most times. Same with, a lot of people say, well, the only reason I shoot 3.5 is because they don't make a 4, that kind of thing. As we've talked about plenty of times on the show, you can kill them with 3-inch 2s all year long. I have full confidence in that. So where that really matters though is, if I miss a bird, the first thing that comes to my mind is not my shot, the size of the shot or the speed of the shot. First thing that comes to my mind is I probably didn't have my cheek down on the stock enough, or I didn't lead that bird enough. So, with silhouettes, a lot of guys want to say if a bird, if birds flare, oh, they were shine on the decoys. That's what it was. It's probably the fact that, I'd look at some other things first. Maybe you're not concealed well enough. Is your pocket big enough? Did you set up right on the wind? Did you call too much? Did you call too little? There's a lot of things that go into that. So, put confidence in the stuff that you have, and check those other things first before you start, drawing these, overwhelming conclusions about one particular facet of the product. So that's kind of where I stand with that. And, I certainly would have full confidence going over a silhouette spread, and probably plan to do so here in the near future on some of my hunts, just depending on, where I got to go and how far I got to walk, like the kind of things you were talking about.
Yeah. And, he said it does take practice to hunt fully over silhouettes, and it had almost sounded like a challenge a little bit. So who knows what's to come.
Yeah. So you got anything else you want to cover here before we sort of get into the parting shot and wrap up the show?
No, most seasons are in full swing. So, if you have any pictures, put them up on our Facebook page or Twitter. And, we love seeing that. We love the interaction. And as always, just stay safe.
I would echo everything you just said. So let's go ahead and get into this week's parting shot. So this week's parting shot is basically just a story that I'd like to share with all of you out there who have ever forgot something, whether it be a headlamp or a bag of decoys or something like that. You left it at home or whatever. This past weekend, I decided to leave my trolling motor on my canoe at the ramp, and I drove all the way home, about an hour actually. And I got home and I was cleaning off my stuff and realized that I had left my motor at the ramp. So I called down to the area that was hunting, and they were actually able to send somebody over there and confirm that it was still there. So fortunately, it hadn't been stolen, but I spent the rest of my Sunday afternoon driving an hour back down to pick up my motor and driving an hour back home to put it away. So the moral of this story is, for all of you that have ever left something at the dock or left it at home or forgot something that you were kicking yourself for, you're not alone. And I can absolutely relate. So, it's a lesson learned, and, it's something that I know a lot of you all listening here today can probably relate to. But just like me, I'm sure that all of you will never make that same mistake twice. That's going to do it for this episode 15 of the HP Outdoors Waterfowl podcast. We hope you enjoyed our profile of the Gadwall and our conversation with Al Falkenstein of Big Al's Decoys. You can check him out at bigalsdecoys.com, and you can check out us at hpoutdoors.com, iTunes, Facebook, Twitter. Reach out to us if you have any questions or concerns, or anything that you'd like us to preview or cover in the future. And enjoy your week, and have a safe hunt. And as always, for Dan, I'm Josh. Take care.